Week 1 is officially in the books, and there are a lot of players that played really good and some that played really bad. But in this video, I'm going to give you guys my top 10 week 1 performers, and this is going to be a list mixed with all positions. So you're going to see quarterbacks some week, you're going to see running backs, receivers, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, secondary, even kickers maybe some week. Whoever are the top 10 performers of that week are going to make this list. So every week is going to be different, but in week 1, here's my top 10. And at number 10, we have Christian McCaffrey. So the 49ers played the Steelers, and it wasn't particularly close. Christian McCaffrey kind of just gashed the Steelers defense all game. And coming into this game, I was really excited to see what Christian could do now that he had a full offseason to learn that Shanahan offense. And man, he did not disappoint. He had 152 rushing yards on 22 attempts and a touchdown. And he also didn't do much in the receiving game with only 17 receiving yards, which is a bit odd, especially for Christian McCaffrey. But they really didn't need him in the passing game, especially with another person we're going to talk about later in this video. But yeah, CMC was just gashing the Steelers defense almost all game, especially up the middle. Almost all of his big runs happened just straight up the middle. And then he did bounce one to the outside, and he took that thing 65 yards to the end zone. And that play was blocked really good by the receivers. I believe it was Brandon Ayuk, and I'm not sure who the other receiver was, but there were two receivers that blocked it really well down the field, and they were the reason CMC was able to score on that play. But all in all, just a really good performance from CMC. I'm sure it won't be the best we see from him this season, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes an appearance on this list later in the year. Moving on to number 9, we do have Micah Parsons. And man, he might not have filled the stat sheet, but if you watch that game, you know just how terrorizing Micah Parsons is to that Giants offensive line. I mean, as a Giants fan, I'm used to it. Just seeing Micah Parsons destroy Evan Neal game after game after game when they play. And at this point, I do think Evan Neal is petrified of this man. I think Evan Neal sees Micah Parsons in his nightmares. So I always expect Micah Parsons to just destroy the Giants every single time they play. And that's what he did this game. I mean, he didn't even play many snaps just because the Cowboys blew the Giants out of the water. So yeah, I expect Micah Parsons to have a lot better games, especially stat sheet wise. But I had to include him on this list just because he was just everywhere. He might not have gotten to Daniel Jones a lot, only one time. But man, I knew Daniel Jones could feel Micah Parsons' presence. Moving on to number 8, we do have Breece Hall, and this was his first game following his week 7 ACL injury, and he did not look like he was coming off of an ACL injury, that's for sure. I believe it was his first run of the game went for like 20 yards or something like that, and he was making cuts. He looked like the same Breece Hall of last year. Now, he did only have 10 attempts, but those 10 attempts went for 127 rushing yards, and he wasn't able to score, but he did have about an 80+ yard run, and it just looked like he ran out of gas towards the end. Maybe that had to do with the ACL, maybe not, I'm not sure, but you'll take an 80-yard run when you can get it. And he just looked like he was really comfortable making cuts, which is something that's not normal for a guy that's coming off of an ACL injury, but he looked like rookie Breece Hall, which is a very, very good sign for the Jets. And so now they probably have the best running back duo in the league with him and Dalvin Cook. But today I decided to add Breece Hall mainly because it was just a shocker that he was able to play this good coming off of that ACL injury. And moving on to number 7, I do have Justin Jefferson, and he just did a really good job at working that intermediate middle of the field. I mean, it seemed like almost every catch he was getting was about a 15-yard gain on like an in route, and it just seemed like the Buccaneers could not guard that man, especially in the first half. In the first half, he had 138 yards, and then he finished with 150, so he did most of his work in the first half, and he wasn't able to get into the end zone either. And if it wasn't for Justin Jefferson, I don't think they would have even had a chance with the Buccaneers, because really besides Jefferson, the only one that played decent was Jordan Addison, who had 61 yards and a touchdown, and the rushing game wasn't doing much either that game. So really Kirk Cousins could only rely on Justin Jefferson, and week in and week out, Justin Jefferson is proving that he's that alpha receiver, probably top 2 in the league. I don't have Justin Jefferson as my best receiver, and I'll get to the best receiver in the league in a little bit. But yeah, Justin Jefferson just had a really good game, and it's kind of expected from him at this point. And moving on to number 6, I do have Brandon Ayuk, and it's starting to look like Brandon Ayuk is going to be that receiver 1 in San Francisco, and it looks like he's got a really good relationship and chemistry with Brock Purdy. And in week 1, he had 8 receptions on 8 targets for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. And again, kind of just like Justin Jefferson, Ayuk did a lot of his damage in the first half, and the reason for that is just because the 49ers blew the Steelers out, like I said earlier. After the second half, the game was basically over, and they just fed the ball to Christian McCaffrey and just kind of milked the clock. So if the game was a little bit closer, I think Brandon Ayuk might have had an even bigger game than the 129 yards and 2 touchdowns he had. And it just looked like he was really the safety blanket for Brock Purdy. Anytime they needed a big play, Brock Purdy went to Brandon Ayuk and he delivered. And on that second touchdown that he had, that was just a perfectly thrown ball and just a perfect catch. Brock Purdy put it right where it needed to be, and Brandon Ayuk didn't really put his arms out until the last second, so that way the defender couldn't break the ball up. And so I'm excited to see what Brandon Ayuk can do this season, and I think he's going to have a really big breakout season, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have him on the list further down the line in the season. Coming in at number 5, I do have Drake Jackson, the edge rusher for the 49ers, and I know we got a lot of 49ers players on here, but they look like far and away the best team in the league, so I think it's okay to have a few 49ers players on this top 10 performers list. And Drake Jackson isn't known to be one of the best players in the league, and I think that might change. He's just a really hard worker, and he doesn't give up on any of the plays. 2 of his 3 sacks this game, he just didn't stop on the play. He just kept going, and when Kenny Pickett was trying to maneuver the pocket, Drake Jackson finally got to him for the sack. So it wasn't really like Drake Jackson beat the lineman immediately, but he just kept working. He never gave up, and that's what you like to see in your defensive linemen, especially the young ones. And hopefully Nick Bosa is going to have an edge rushing partner with Drake Jackson there now, and it'll alleviate some of the pressure that offensive linemen put on Nick Bosa. So it was just a nice little surprise to have Drake Jackson on this list, and that's why I decided to put him a little bit higher than a lot of people probably would. Now coming in at number 4, we have a player with a similar stat sheet and Josh Allen, the edge rusher Josh Allen from Jacksonville. Definitely not the quarterback Josh Allen. He is not going to be on this list, trust me. But the Jacksonville Josh Allen just had a really good game, just like Drake Jackson. He had 3 sacks. And really the whole Jaguars defensive line was getting to Anthony Richardson. I mean, I think the Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker edge rushing duo is going to be one of the best in the league if they can stick together and develop. But Josh Allen just had one of the better defensive games I've seen this week. Coming in at number 3, I have Jordan Whitehead from the New York Jets. And he had one of the best defensive games that we're probably going to see this season. I mean, he picked off one of the best quarterbacks in the league 3 times. Now, granted, 2 of them were really just terrible decisions by Josh Allen. I mean, it really looked like Jordan Whitehead was the receiver. That's how bad the throws were and kind of uncalled for. But I'm not going to take that away from Jordan Whitehead. I mean, 3 interceptions are 3 interceptions, especially the last one. The last one was still a bad decision by Josh Allen, but it was more of a good play by Jordan Whitehead. I mean, he just jumped the route. Now, Josh Allen definitely shouldn't have threw that ball, and it was a bad decision, but Jordan Whitehead just had a game of his life and really single-handedly kept the Jets in the game long enough so that Zach Wilson and the offense can figure it out and eventually win it in overtime. Coming in at number 2, I do have Tyreek Hill, the best receiver in the NFL in my opinion. Now, I'm going to give a lot of credit to Mike McDaniel. I mean, he's just a genius of an offensive play caller. He constantly kept Tyreek Hill in motion, and I think it really threw off the Chargers secondary, and it kind of created angles and routes that the Chargers really just couldn't guard, especially with his speed. But he ended the day with 11 receptions on 15 targets for 215 yards and 2 touchdowns, and one of those touchdowns being the game-winning touchdown. Now, I just think Tyreek Hill is the best receiver in the league. I mean, that speed is unguardable at times, especially when you have a great head coach and great play caller in Mike McDaniel who can just scheme you up wide open. And I think this Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa quarterback wide receiver duo is going to be very scary this season. And I think Tua Tagovailoa could be a dark horse for the MVP. Now, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later because, spoiler alert, he might be my number 1 player this week. But back to Tyreek Hill, I mean, he claimed that he wanted to have a 2,000-yard receiving season, and he's on pace to do that. He's about 10% of the way there. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets it done as long as he stays healthy and Tua Tagovailoa stays healthy. And at number 1, somewhat unsurprisingly, is going to be Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, he had 466 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception to, I believe, J.C. Jackson. But I think Tua Tagovailoa, for the most part, was very accurate and very timely on his throws. Now, it helps when you have 2 of the better receivers in the league who are just open almost all the time. But He was also clutch when it mattered. That last drive showed a lot that I like, especially that last touchdown play where he just fitted in perfectly to Tyreek Hill. I mean, I don't think he could have threw a more perfect ball. And so Tua Tagovailoa is definitely showing that he has that clutch gene and can get it done in the clutch. And a fun fact, Tua Tagovailoa's performance today was the 5th most passing yards by a Dolphin in the franchise's history. And I believe it was also towards the top of week 1 passing yards as well. So it really went down as an all-time great performance by Tua Tagovailoa. And if he didn't have that interception to tarnish his stat line, we could be talking about one of the top 10 performances of the year. But regardless, he is my number 1 player, and that's going to do it for the video. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out a lot. And as always, this is the Draft Nerd. Thanks for watching.